Have you ever had news to share that was so good that you couldn't keep it in? You couldn't hold it in. Like something, no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't keep it a secret. You just couldn't keep it to yourself. Maybe for you, maybe it was a time that you graduated from university or college or high school or grade 8. I don't know. Maybe it was something like that. Maybe something that you achieved and you just wanted to tell everybody. Or maybe it was like that time that boy or that girl that you really had a crush on, you asked them on a date and they said yes. And you just couldn't wait to tell all your friends that they had said yes, that they were going to go with you, and you just couldn't believe your luck. Maybe that was a time where you had some news you couldn't hold in. Or maybe it was an engagement. Maybe that time where you got engaged and you just couldn't wait to tell everybody. Or maybe it was a pregnancy, right? Maybe it was a pregnancy and you just couldn't wait to let the whole world know. I remember I was like that when we found out that Carrie was pregnant with Keelan. Well, to be really honest with you, Keelan wasn't Keelan yet. I think Keelan's first name was Cletus the fetus. I was a youth pastor, and I think one of the girls in the youth group, I think it was Aaron Block, named him Cletus the fetus. And the funny thing was, it kind of stuck. And so for the longest time, we called him Cletus the fetus. I wonder how Keelan would feel if we'd actually kept the name. Well, we probably would have dropped the fetus part, but we decided not to. But see, here's the thing. When we found out that Carrie was pregnant, it was huge news. Carrie and I had been told that we weren't going to be able to have kids. Carrie had some complications from an emergency surgery, and the doctors had said that because of those complications, kids were not going to be in the cards for us. And so we had just started to get our heads around this idea that we were going to have to adopt if we wanted to have kids. And so we had kind of, figured that was sort of going to be our lot in life. Now, there was this woman that Carrie and I both knew who felt like God had called her to pray for women who were not able to have kids. She felt like God had called her to pray for barren women that they could have children. And so she called us and she asked if she could come and pray for Carrie. And what were we going to say? We can't say no. And so we said, yeah, sure, that's fine. And she came over to see us, and she prayed for Carrie, and she prayed that God would give Carrie and I a child. Well, a few months later, we start to see some signs, or maybe don't see some signs that Carrie is pregnant. And so we go and we get one of those home pregnancy tests, and we take the test, and it turns out, says that it's positive, Carrie's pregnant. We think, well, that can't be right. So Carrie goes to the doctor's office in town, and they do a test at the doctor's office, and it says that it's positive and that she's pregnant. Well, now we're kind of concerned, and so we decide, well, I guess we better go see the specialist that Carrie had seen, who told us we can't have kids, to make sure that everything is okay. And so we get to the specialist's office, and he says, there's no way that you're pregnant. Those home pregnancy tests are always giving false positives. And we said, well, actually, we went and got one done at the doctor's office as well. And he says, well, that's kind of interesting. And so he sends Carrie for an ultrasound. And we get there for the ultrasound. He sends her into the ultrasound, and sure enough, Carrie is pregnant. And we are ecstatic. Now, the crazy thing is, like I said, I was a youth pastor at the time, so I was actually literally on my way to a youth retreat when we stopped off for this appointment with the specialist. I met Carrie at the office, and I was there for the appointment and for the ultrasound. I found out the good news. Then I got back into my car and headed off to this youth retreat where I was going to have all these kids. Now, I know they say you're supposed to wait 3 months to let people know if you're pregnant, just in case something happens. And I really tried hard to wait 3 months. But I have to be honest, I only made it 1 day. By the next day at the retreat, I had told everybody that I knew that Carrie was pregnant. I just couldn't keep it to myself. I was so excited. I was so excited. This was a miracle. This was something that we were told was never going to be able to happen. And it was happening. I couldn't keep that to myself. I couldn't not tell people. And so I let everybody know that we were going to be having a baby. And why would I want to keep that to myself? Why wouldn't you want to share good news with people that you care about? Why are we so afraid sometimes to share good news? Now, today, I want to talk about something that came up. I use this software called Logos. It's like a Bible. It's like a theological library on my computer, and I can search through all sorts of things. I've got all sorts of digital copies of these books, and then it also has a few things like every day I get a verse of the day. And this past week, I can't remember what day it was, but Psalm 96 verses 2 and 3 were the verse of the day, and it popped up, and this is what it says. It says, "Sing to the Lord, bless his name, share the news of his saving work every single day. Declare God's glory among the nations, declare his wondrous works among all people." Now, here's the thing. If you grew up in church, if you grew up in some kind of evangelical community, you probably almost kind of translate this verse in your head a little bit as you're reading it. At least I do. Maybe as you hear this verse, you picture some guy declaring the works of the Lord, and you picture a guy on the sidewalk with a megaphone or a sign, that kind of thing. And this guy is like a street preacher declaring God's words to the nation, that kind of thing. That's the vibe that you get. And the question that I find myself asking is that what it means to declare God's glory to people? Is that what this is about? Is this verse actually about trying to convert everybody? Is that what we're talking about? We're trying to convert everybody to Christianity? Is that what we're supposed to do, right? And I guess sometimes it comes from a good place. I mean, after all, didn't Jesus tell us that we're supposed to go into the whole world and make disciples? Isn't that what it means to be a follower of Jesus? And so when we read a verse like this that says, go sing to God, sing his praises, tell the nations, right away we start thinking about missions, and then we start thinking about conversion. But I thought, what if we thought about it differently? What if we kind of looked at it a little bit differently? Jesus told some parables, I think, that help give us an idea of maybe like a different approach. So Jesus, in this one section in Luke chapter 15, Jesus is talking about he's talking about how much God loves us and how excited God gets when one of us decides to come home, when one of us decides to repent, or more accurately return to how God intended us to live life. And so he's telling all these different parables. And so he starts by telling the story of a shepherd who has lost one of his sheep, and he goes out looking for the sheep. He leaves the 99 back at his place, and he heads out trying to find this lost sheep, and then he finds the lost sheep and he brings it home. And what's important for us here is once he gets home, he calls everybody he knows, and he says this. He says, "Celebrate with me because I found my lost sheep." All right, the next one. So then Jesus tells a story about this woman, and this woman has 10 silver coins, which is a fortune, and she loses one of them. She loses one of these coins, and so she panics. And Jesus says that she searches the entire house until she finds this lost coin. And when she finally finds the lost coin, listen to what she does. She invites over everybody she knows, and she says this: "Celebrate with me because I found my lost coin." Then, again, Jesus famously tells a story that we often call the prodigal son, but he tells this story about a father who had these two sons, and one of them takes off, squanders his wealth, disappears, and then finally comes home. Now, this is an amazing parable. I've preached on it so many times. I absolutely love this parable. But what's really fascinating to me is that Jesus is telling a story, and what we find the father in this particular story, we find the father standing on the road, waiting for the son to come home. And when the son finally comes home, the father literally cannot wait to start celebrating. While they're still on the road, the story sounds like. He calls the servants to him, and he tells them to start getting stuff ready for the party. And this is what he says: "We must celebrate with feasting, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Here's the thing that I got thinking about these parables. Everybody in these stories that Jesus is telling, can't wait to start sharing the good news they have. They can't wait. They want everybody they know to share in the good news that they have experienced, this exciting event. And they, not just that, but they share the good news with enthusiasm. It's not just like, "Hey, everybody, my son is home." No. We're throwing a party. It's not like, "Hey, you know what happened to me the other day? I lost one of my coins and I found it again. It was so awesome." No, they throw a party. It's not like, "Hey, you know what? I had 99 sheep, but I lost one, but it's okay. I found it again." No, everybody come over. Everybody come party. I want to not only share the good news, but I want to share my joy with you. I love that. There's a party every time in one of these stories. They have good news, and they're not keeping it to themselves. Okay, so I know that you know what I'm getting at, right? I know you know what I'm getting at. I realize that I am not that sneaky. Of course, I am talking about evangelism today. Of course, I am talking about sharing the good news or the gospel with people around us, telling other people about Jesus. Now, at Vox, I often use the phrase sharing the message and life of Jesus when I talk about this kind of thing. But before we talk about evangelism, I want to talk about backpacking gear, because that makes perfect sense. I can't think of something more evangelistic than backpacking gear. And here's the thing. I love backpacking gear. I love gear. I just think it's really cool. And I have a bit of an obsession. There's this really cool company called GSI Outdoors, and they make all sorts of amazing backpacking and camping stuff, like stuff that folds up and comes in its own little cool containers. Tim and Rhonda actually got me this for my birthday. It's from GSI Outdoors, and it's actually a wine container for packing, and it folds up, and you can actually sort of take it apart, and you can actually sort of squish the whole thing up, and then the whole thing actually kind of rolls up like this, and you've got this cool little wine bottle that I can take around. It's the coolest thing. Not to mention, I like the idea of bringing some wine with me on the trail. But Tim and Rhonda got me this for my birthday. And they make all sorts of stuff. GSI makes all sorts of stuff. They actually have, let me get this right, they have a Japanese sentoku chef's knife set for camping. Comes in its own little case, the whole bit. I love the stuff that they have. Now, unfortunately, a lot of their stuff weighs too much to take backpacking, actually. And usually it's a little too heavy, but it's amazing for car camping if you want stuff that packs up really, really small. Because here's the thing that I have found over the years. See, Carrie and I have learned quite a bit about what backpacking gear is really good, what backpacking gear is unnecessary. When Carrie and I started backpacking, the first time that we ever went, our packs weighed about 65 to 70 pounds each. In fact, we had stools, I had a little collapsible stool, we had all sorts of stuff, and we had these heavy pots and a frying pan, we had everything. And over the years, we've kind of whittled that down and whittled that down and whittled that down. And now my pack's around 30 to 35 pounds and Carrie's is about 20 to 25 pounds, depending on how much water we have. And we've learned some stuff about camping. We've learned what works. We've learned what doesn't work. We've learned what's worth spending some real money on. And we've learned what it's not worth spending money on. You can just get something really cheap and use that instead. Like, that's kind of the idea that we have. And I love talking about gear with people. I love talking about gear with people that we meet on the trail and other people that I backpack. In fact, one of the kind of like a dream job for me would actually maybe be selling outdoor gear in a store or an outdoor store, something like that. Somewhere where I could share with people what I've learned backpacking and say, oh, this is what worked for me. Because to me, when I find something that works really, really well, I want to share that information with other people. I want other people to know too, so they can have this amazing experience with what works really, really well. And also sometimes when I've learned that some things just don't work very well or aren't really worth carrying around, I want people to know that too. And so this idea of sharing good news just seems to be something that makes sense to me. Are you starting to see what the psalmist is getting at here in Psalm chapter 96? In Psalm 96, right? Let's look at it again. Sing to the Lord, bless his name, share the news of his saving work every single day. Declare God's glory among the nations, declare his wondrous works among all people. This is what the psalmist is doing here. He's saying, like, call everybody you know and say, come celebrate with me. Come be a part of this with me. Come hear the good news that I want to share with you. Like, it's time to party, everybody. Come on over. You wouldn't believe the good news that I have to share. This way of thinking about it isn't about manipulation. It's not about trying to, like, convert somebody to Christianity in the ways that we often think about it. It's not about trying to, like, argue somebody into becoming a Christian. No, it's about sharing something amazing and incredible and good that you've found for your life, that you've found and you've learned and you want other people to know as well. It's about sharing good news. It's not about an argument necessary. It's not about kind of like these, like, well, I got this rock solid rational argument and it will beat other people into submission. No, the psalmist says, share the news. The psalmist says, declare what God has done, right? Just share the good news. Just declare what God has done. I mentioned earlier that a lot of us tend to adjust these verses when we read them. We adjust them in our heads a little bit because of our upbringing, for those of us that are raised in the church, right? We got told over the years that we were supposed to be looking for every opportunity to try to get somebody to accept Jesus as their personal savior, right? That was like the goal of being a Christian, was trying to do that. The goal of being a Christian was trying to help others understand that they were sinners and that they needed God. Many of us even memorized verses, like maybe if you were in Awana or something like that, or Bible quizzing, you might have memorized a verse like this, like 1 Peter 3:15, that says, excuse me, but in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. Now, the emphasis was almost never on gentleness and respect, but the emphasis was almost always on always being prepared to make a defense. See, here's the problem. That sounds like we're getting ready to go to war. That sounds like we're getting ready to make a defense, right? It sounds like we actually believe that we're about to be attacked. And so since we're going to be attacked at any moment, then we should really make sure that we have a defense ready just in case, right? We all knew that we should have our memorized arguments down pat in case we had a chance to jump on someone and try to shove Jesus down their throat. But that's not what this says. What this says is, it says, be prepared, right, to make a defense, to give a reason for the hope that is in you. See the difference? First, people are going to be amazed at the hope that is in you. We've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit. And when people see the fruit of the Spirit in your life, when they see your life beginning to have more and more love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control, excuse me, when they see that beginning to be more and more and more in your life, they're going to want to know why. They're going to want to know, what is the reason for this hope, this joy, this love, this peace? What is the reason for all this in your life? How can this be? And that's what evangelism should really be. Evangelism is answering the question, why is this good news to you? I want to sit in this for a little while. I'm actually going to give us a lot of questions, and I'm going to give us a lot of questions without answers for a little bit here. Why is this good news for you? Let's not rush. What is it about Jesus that makes you want to follow him? Why have you decided to make Jesus' teaching the foundation for your life? How you make decisions about your life? Why Jesus? These are the questions that we have to sit with first. Why is this good news? Why Jesus? Why are we following Jesus? Feel those questions, right? Feel those questions and then answer those questions. I would encourage you to put that kind of stuff down on paper. Take some time to think through in your life, why have you decided to follow Jesus if this is a decision you've made? What is it about him that makes you want to follow him? I know journaling is not for everybody. I am a terrible journaler. It's not something that I'm interested in. But sometimes it is really worth it to start to write this stuff down. Why Jesus? Here's some other questions for you to wrestle with as well. Why faith at all? Why do you have faith at all? Why are you still believing in something so crazy as a God who loves you, as a deity in 2020? What is it about God? What have you seen? What experiences have you had? Where have you seen God show up in your life? Why do you believe so strongly? See, for me, there are experiences, there are times in my life where God showed up, and he showed up in ways that I still cannot totally understand or explain. And because of those things, even when I'm beginning to doubt, I remember those moments, those experiences, and I remember that God is actually real, that God does love me and care about me. What are those experiences in your life? What are those good news moments that you want to share with other people? Why do you believe so strongly? This is the idea of declaring his wondrous works. Now, the psalmist is writing a poem, and so it's fancy and it's frilly and it's bigger than life, but that's really all it is. The psalmist is just saying, look, tell people what God has done in your life. Not what God has done necessarily in other people's lives, not what God maybe even did in the Bible, etc., but what has God done in your life that you just can't keep to yourself? It's not the arguments that we have. It's what you've seen God do in your life. It's the reasons that you love Jesus. See, when I'm talking about backpacking, I get excited, right? When I talk about backpacking, I get excited. If I start telling people stories about when Carrie and I have gone backpacking and why I love backpacking, and I start talking about how I feel when I'm out on the trail and what it does to my mental health and my physical health and all that kind of stuff, when I talk about it, I'm not trying to argue other people into becoming backpackers. I don't have 5 points that all start with the same letter where I'm going to beat them over the head until they too will finally become a backpacker. No, I'm just sharing something that I love and that I am passionate about. And then to me, it's such good news. I can't keep it to myself. I'm so excited about it. I can't hold it in. And because of that kind of excitement, some other people have gotten excited about backpacking as well. And I've talked about it, and they've said, I want to try that out too. And then off they've gone, and then they go backpacking, and they give it a try, and they're like, I love it too. Now, that doesn't deal with all the questions that people might have about backpacking or about faith, right? Sometimes me just telling my stories isn't enough for somebody, for example, to know how to start backpacking themselves. And I might begin to talk about God. I might begin to talk about why I love Jesus so much. And that doesn't answer all of the metaphysical questions and all the huge questions about how can a good God allow suffering. I mean, there's so much of that kind of stuff. And so there's more discussion to be had later. But it starts with this idea of sharing what God has done in your life. And then we have to ask ourselves deeper questions too. So not only why is this such good news to you? Why have you chosen to follow Jesus? Why have you decided to make the way that Jesus taught a foundation for your life? What is it about him? But then it goes deeper. Like, why choose a way of life that is so contrary to the way our world tends to think, particularly in North America, right? This is probably one of the hardest things. The way that Jesus taught us how to live isn't lined up with the way that the world tends to see things, particularly in North America. The way Jesus taught us is this very different way of seeing life. And people have a really hard time with that. They have a hard time understanding that love is better than hatred, that joy is better than bitterness, that peace is better than strife. Like, on one hand, it's easy for people to grasp, but on the other hand, it always seems to be this real struggle. And so people have a hard time with it. So why have you chosen this way of life? What is it about this way of life that has proven itself to you to actually be a better way to engage with life? This is something that takes a little bit of thought, right? What is it about it that just seems to make more sense to you? And then, quite frankly, it's also a way of life that is going to put you at odds with a lot of evangelical Christianity in North America these days. Following Jesus, ironically, sort of moves us away from what a lot of Christianity seems to say matters. And you have to start asking that. So are you ready to give an answer for that, is what Peter's talking about in his passage. So here's the question. These are the questions that really are the foundation, the one that we started with. Why are you trying to follow Jesus? What is it about him? Why? And why is that good news? Why is it good news? You see, for me, following Jesus is the only thing that has ever consistently made sense. Nothing else makes much sense to me. It doesn't seem to work. When I choose to live my life the way Jesus taught me, the way Jesus has showed me in the scriptures, and the way that he died and rose again to make possible, when I live my life that way, it makes sense. When I rebel against that, it begins to bring about hurt, pain, destruction, brokenness. So that makes sense to me. And that's good news. I want people to know that that's good news. I want to share that good news. I love the way that Jesus taught us to live. I love the way he leads us and he guides us. And even more so, sometimes when I find myself being set free from some of the religious and institutional ideas over the years because of my decision to follow Jesus, that's good news too. And I want people to know. I want you to know. It's why I put all these together. It's why I keep trying to teach people about what it means to follow Jesus, because it's good news. So, if you're like me, if you have found this to be good news, then let's remember what the psalmist said. Sing to the Lord, bless his name, share the news of his saving work every single day. Declare God's glory among the nations and declare his amazing and wondrous works among all the people. Because it's good news. God bless. Thanks for joining us again this week. So glad that you could be here, and we'll see you next time. See you later.